the journey begins. A physics approach? Isn't that a great way to turn something exciting into something boring? When the person sitting next to me on a plane asks what I do, I have two options. If I feel like talking, I'll say astronomy, which infallibly triggers an interesting conversation. If I don't, I'll say physics, at which point they typically say something like, "Oh, that was my worst subject in high school," and leave me alone for the rest of the flight. Indeed, physics was also my least favorite subject in high school. I still remember my very first physics class. With a monotonous and sedative voice, our teacher announced that we were going to learn about density. That density was mass divided by volume, so if the mass was blah and the volume was blah, then we could calculate that the density was blah blah. After that point, all I remember is a big blur, and that whenever his experiments failed, he'd blame humidity and say, "It worked this morning," and that some friends of mine couldn't figure out why their experiment wasn't working until they'd discovered that I'd mischievously attached a magnet underneath their oscilloscope. When the time came to apply for college, I decided against physics and other technical fields and ended up at the Stockholm School of Economics, focusing on environmental issues. I wanted to do my small part to make our planet a better place, and felt that the main problem wasn't that we lacked technical solutions, but that we didn't properly use the technology we had. I figured that the best way to affect people's behavior was through their wallets, and was intrigued by the idea of creating economic incentives that aligned individual egoism with the common good. Alas, I soon grew disillusioned, concluding that economics was largely a form of intellectual prostitution, where you got rewarded for saying what the powers that be wanted to hear. Whatever a politician wanted to do, he or she could find an economist as advisor who had argued for doing precisely that. Franklin D. Roosevelt wanted to increase government spending, so he listened to John Maynard Keynes, whereas Ronald Reagan wanted to decrease government spending, so he listened to Milton Friedman. Then my classmate Johann Oldhoff gave me the book that changed everything. "Surely you're joking, Mr. Feynman." I never got to meet Richard Feynman, but he's the reason I switched to physics. Although the book wasn't really about physics, dwelling more on topics such as how to pick locks and how to pick up women, I could read between the lines that this guy just loved physics, which really intrigued me. If you see a mediocre-looking guy walking arm in arm with a gorgeous woman, you probably wonder if you're missing something. Presumably, she's seen some hidden quality in him. Suddenly, I felt the same way about physics. What did Feynman see that I'd missed in high school? I just had to solve this mystery, so I sat down with Volume 1 of The Feynman Lectures on Physics, which I found in Dad's bookcase, and started reading. If, in some cataclysm, all of scientific knowledge were to be destroyed, and only one sentence passed on to the next generation of creatures, what statement would contain the most information in the fewest words? Whoa. This guy was nothing like my high school physics teacher. Feynman continued, "I believe it is that all things are made of atoms, little particles that move around in perpetual motion, attracting each other when they are a little distance apart, but repelling upon being squeezed into one another." A light bulb went off in my head. I read on and on and on, spellbound. I felt like I was having a religious experience. I finally got it. I had the epiphany that explained what I'd been missing all along, and what Feynman had realized. Physics is the ultimate intellectual adventure. The quest to understand the deepest mysteries of our universe. Physics doesn't take something fascinating and make it boring. Rather, it helps us see more clearly, adding to the beauty and wonder of the world around us. When I bike to work in the fall, I see beauty in the trees tinged with red, orange, and gold, but seeing these trees through the lens of physics reveals even more beauty, captured by the Feynman quote that opens this chapter. And the deeper I look, the more elegance I glimpse. We'll see in Chapter 3 how the trees ultimately come from stars. And we'll see in Chapter 8 how studying their building blocks suggests their existence in parallel universes. At this time, I had a girlfriend studying physics at the Royal Institute of Technology, and her textbooks seemed so much more interesting than mine. Our relationship didn't last, but my love for physics did. Since college was free in Sweden, I enrolled in her university without telling the Stockholm School of Economics administrators about my secret double life. My detective investigation had officially begun, and this book is my report a quarter of a century later. So, what is reality then? My goal with this audaciously titled chapter isn't to arrogantly try to sell you on an ultimate answer, although we'll explore intriguing possibilities in the last part of the book, but rather to invite you along on my personal journey of exploration and to share with you my excitement and reflections about these mind-expanding mysteries. Like me, I think you'll conclude that whatever reality is, it's wildly different from what we once thought, and a fascinating enigma at the very heart of our everyday lives. I hope you will, like me, find that this places everyday problems such as parking tickets and heartaches in a refreshing perspective, making it easier to take them in stride and focus on enjoying life and its mysteries to the fullest.